Again, we are on to part 8 of Grandpa's trip to Germany, June 2026, May and June. Um, we had just left Rottenburg, and I was actually waiting at the train station while Kay had gone to recycle her bottles at the nearby uh, grocery store. There was a vending machine there, and we did get very much into kind of apple flavored water drinks. We did a lot of that. We were constantly thirsty. We were burning through uh, a lot of hydration just based on what we were, calories we were burning, and I think we did a pretty good job with it. But we were real careful about not letting it go too far without grabbing something to drink. So just always be prepared. If you got to pay a little extra because of whatever reason, then do it because you can't just not drink. That's for sure. So I wrote this down on Saturday, but I think it has a little bit of a recap on the rest of that Friday. So Saturday, May 30th, 12:30 p.m. We made it to Nuremberg. We took this crazy kind of circuitous route to our hotel. We knew it was near the train station, but at the Nuremberg train station, there are several intersections where you've got to cross several streets at a time sometimes. And we ended up taking like a really, really big circle around back to where if we'd have just come out of the station and turned right, we'd have got there within like 5 minutes. And as it was, it probably took us 15 or 20. And, not a huge deal. Again, we're carrying all of our stuff, which I will praise us once again for having packed pretty efficiently. That's for sure. So we got to our hotel. It was pretty basic, this hotel, but nice. We didn't really stay in any place that wasn't nice. Um, I would recommend, and I have this written down in my journal here, if you're carrying everything, book a place to stay that's close to this train station. Now, there's advantages and disadvantages to this. You're probably not going to find the quaint, sort of rustic character types of places that you want to stay, but so they're going to be a more generic. But I think part of my fatigue, I guess, was based upon the fact that we ended up a lot of the time having to spend energy going from train station to hotel. And if it was not a short distance, then you've not only taken energy and time away from what else you could be doing, um, but you've kind of, I don't know, you've exhausted some resources. That's about the best way I can put it. So, some physical and mental resources. And, again, it all depends on what your priorities are. Of course, you can Uber. We did not. We decided to walk, which I think is economically really smart because if you're able to walk, you should. Um, we talked about renting an electric e-bike or something at one point. It just never really did work out, and we just figured we could always cover the distance by foot. So if it were up to me, I would book more places near where I'm arriving from, whether it's um, well, really, train station. If you're flying in somewhere, you can take a train to another train station. But a hotel that's a mile away from the train station, just know you're spending some energy there. That may or may not be better spent doing something else. That's about the best I can put it. Um, I did make also a note here. If you're walking with a purpose, if you know where you're going, that's actually a different kind of walking than the walking that you do when you're just sort of aimlessly wandering and I don't know, trying to find a restaurant or trying to just sightsee, I guess. So there's the meandering sort of walking, and then there's the walking like we got to get somewhere, and that's usually when you're carrying all of your stuff. Um, it's interesting when we got to Nuremberg, I made the comment that I felt pretty good, and I did. I felt really good. I had no idea how much more we were about to do, and this was early-ish afternoon, I think. Something, I'm thinking it was probably 12:30, 1 o'clock, something like that. Well, in fact, I'm writing things down in this journal at 12:30 p.m. So, um, we spent a little bit of time in Rothenburg. We got on a train. We got to um, Nuremberg and started sort of making a plan. Um, Another big walking adventure. So we went to this house of Dürer, I want to say. This is a famous artist from Nuremberg. I'm going to let you Google him. Um, he has this really famous painting of a rabbit. That was kind of the theme of the souvenirs and stuff. But it's so detailed that you can actually see the reflection of the wooden cross window pane slats in the rabbit's eyes if you look at this painting. So um, very impressive for sure. Um, he also has a self-portrait where he looks like Jesus in a fur coat, which I'm sure was scandalous back in the day and probably still is. And he has another one that's really less flattering where he is completely nude. And honestly, I thought he looked kind of like an old man. In the Jesus one, he looks kind of young, and in the self-portrait, he doesn't look nearly as spry. So there's that. Um, he had published, and I have a feeling he had early printing press success. He had published some illustrations based upon the passages from the book of Revelations. And if you know anything about the Bible, that's sort of this, I don't know, fever trip on the part of, I think it was John the Apostle, um, about the end of the world. So he did some uh, illustrations, and it was kind of terrifying on one level, which is really the only part that I think Kay caught. But I saw some absurdity in it, some Monty Python type of humor in it. There were some caricatures in there rather than illustrations, if you know the difference. Kay did not agree with me. She thought they were all kind of scary. So he also did a very famous portrait of Adam and Eve, and he used live models for his art, which I think again might have been sort of scandalous back in the day. Um, that's probably more art history than I am familiar with, and so I could be off base. But he was a pretty controversial dude. He seemed to be pretty privileged. I don't know that he would have got to do the things he did had he not come from uh, where he came from. And I'll just leave that at that. So we spent a little bit of time in the Dure. We ended up climbing this huge hill to the castle of the First Reich. So if you're familiar with your German history, there's the Third Reich, which has its own horrors and tragic ends, and um, maybe not so tragic ends, depending on how you look at it. Second Reich, which would have been after this castle we visited, and then First Reich, which was several emperors and royalty that lived in this place. But it's the imperial castle. It's in Nuremberg, and one of the first things we saw was a glockenspiel that was going off as we entered the room. And I actually do have a little bit of some photos and some video of this. I don't know how well it's going to come through, but we'll give it a try. But it's this line of mechanical figures that parade along the top of a wall, kind of go back into their den in the corner every time the clock reaches a certain hour. So we got to watch a little bit of that, and I'll see if I can show you some of that. Um, there was a lot of religious art in this castle, but just on our way to the castle, we saw a couple of churches and stuff where there was lots of crucifixes, lots of saints. Nuremberg, I got to be honest, was very German and very modern, whereas Rothenburg was German and old school. Nuremberg was German and new school, and Berlin seemed like more of just a European hub, way more modern. And Nuremberg has not been left behind, but it just doesn't. It's not as flashy, that's for sure. And it's got some darker, rougher edges to it. Figuratively speaking. Most of it was dark and brooding. I guess that's the best way to put it. But it was still rather beautiful. There was an element of terror, though, in kind of all this, especially when you looked at the crucifixes. The Jesus figures were just really, really dark. We had paid for, when we got to this castle, we had paid for a tour of the well. And by the time we had gotten through the castle, we had missed that tour. So we didn't get to go into the well. But we did get to go up into the tower, We paid extra for that, so just know anytime you're going to do this, you got to pay a little extra, and it's usually worth it, just to get a kind of an layout of the city and get a good view of it and stuff like that. It was 113 steps up, and the view was spectacular. Um, we had to walk a mile back to the hotel, but this time at least it was downhill. We did stop for Indian food that was, I would say, okay. It wasn't great. I tried a dish and I couldn't tell you what the dish was, but I had never tried it before, and it was nothing better than what I can really get at home. Kay makes really good Indian food, and there are some places just here in Colorado I think that do better than what we had, but it was not terrible. I had a couple more Radlers. This again is the beer and lemonade, and it was an Augustiner this time. And I was starving at this point. So remember our nice breakfast at the hotel in Rothenburg. By the time we got to this Indian place, it was time to eat. That's for sure. Um, a little bit more on that Saturday that we slept in. Um, so again, that was the end of that Friday when we left Rothenburg, and then on the morning after we checked out of the hotel, we grabbed some coffee and croissants, and now we're catching a train to Munich. If there's one place that we needed to spend a little more time, I think it was probably Munich, and we will get that chance later in the trip when we come back around. We actually spend a little bit of time in Munich. Um, Also very German, a little more modern, I would say, than Nuremberg, at least based on the parts I saw, and just a really really cool place. We had several connections that we had to catch in order to get to Garmisch. Garmisch reminded me a lot of like Keystone, Colorado. There's some mountains, there's some ski slopes, and this was a place that we were going to spend a little more time. So, and we also were hoping to get some laundry done. You're going to find out it was becoming an issue at that point. Um, I can tell you now, spoiler alert, we didn't get to the scheduling didn't work up with when the laundromat was open. There was not something in the um, apartment for us to use to wash laundry, so we were starting to get a little bit short on some clean underwear and some clean shirts and that sort of thing. Um, we did a really good job, by the way, on getting to platforms early for trains that did not allow assigned seating. So if we could make an assignment for a seat, we would get it. And when I say we, that was all Kay's doing. But she would tell me when we didn't have an assigned seat, so let's get to a door, rather quickly so we can grab a seat. And we were able to do just that. So that kind of gets us started on the next day, and then what I'll do is I'll just kind of save the rest of that for the next video. Um, this looks actually like some stuff that I've written down. You know what? I'll throw this at the end of here, and then we'll start on Sunday with the next video. It looks like, oh yeah, when I was waiting in Rothenburg for the train, there happened to be a fire on the tracks. I was sitting there waiting for Sandra to get out of the store with her recycled bottle money, and I heard sirens and stuff, but I didn't really put two and two together. And as it turned out, there was a fire on the tracks between Rothenburg and Schweindorf, which is Pig Village in English. And so that actually delayed the train that was supposed to come before ours. But then when it finally did come, we just got to grab it because now it was on our schedule instead of, the earlier schedule. So, and that's the way the trains kind of work. As long as you have a ticket, if you do get there for the earlier one, you can kind of jump on. So something to keep in mind. Schedule them a little later if you need to, and then if you do get there earlier, it's not a big deal. Um, Berlin, I did make a note here that Berlin felt like a modern city like Chicago or New York. Rothenburg was more of a Renaissance fair, less crowded for sure, and much older. It wasn't complete American, tourist kind of crap food like we get in our Renaissance fairs here. Um, but it was a little hit and miss. We did have the Italian that was definitely the hit, and then we had the German that I liked, but Cassandra did not like so much. But that's maybe more of a matter of taste. Nuremberg definitely feels more like a foreign country than Berlin or Munich does, and the people seem more diverse. I'll say in Nuremberg, maybe maybe they're more concentrated, so it's easy to see them. Whereas in Berlin and some of these other places, maybe they're more spread out. But I saw in Nuremberg a lot of lederhosen among men and women. And the women had bare midriffs and really lacy short sleeves and were really kind of in costume, it looked like, whereas the men just sort of wore it as sort of a normal garb, I guess. Munich definitely has a blue collar feel to it. Case says, by the way, that Munich is the Bavaria or the Texas of Germany. So I will let you guys take that for what it's worth. I'm from Oklahoma. I would not take that as a compliment, but that's kind of the way she looked at it. So therein lies the end of part 8 of our journey, and we are about to get into part 9. Thanks for hanging out with me.